And now, here's your host, Dick Barr.
Good afternoon, Lake County. This is Dick Barr on Unlocking Lake County. Again, here for our next episode with our beautiful co-host, Kristen Kaufman. Say hi, Kristen.
Hello, everybody.
And we have a special treat. We have two competing veterans in the studio today. We have Air Force versus Army. Air Force representative of Jim Walsh. Say hello, Jim.
Air Force rules, hoo-ah.
Whoa, let me bring you down just a tear. Boy, the Air Force came in, shot out like a cannon. What's the Air Force equivalent to that phrase?
That's the same thing we say.
Okay, great. And then representing the Army, we have my managing broker, Bob Link.
Good afternoon.
Woohoo!
Guys, thanks so much for being here. I know you've got your choices. You could be outside on this beautiful 60-plus degree day, but really appreciate you coming to join us for our show.
Absolutely.
Good to be here.
So let's talk just a little bit about the service, and thank you guys both for your service. Appreciate it. What is is there a rivalry between the Air Force and the Army? Be honest.
In my experience, probably not as much as with some of the other branches, but, somewhat, I would guess.
There's a little bit of one. It's more of a jealousy thing, I think, from the Army and the Marines to us.
I would agree. I would agree with that.
I mean, let's be honest. They got to stay in mud. I get to stay in a hotel.
Right.
Right.
I remember the stories, Jim, you telling me about kind of rather insubordinate behavior when you're in the Air Force, and you kind of get away with it.
Yeah, it's depending on where you are in the Air Force. I was a maintainer, so if I didn't do my job right, the pilots didn't get to practice, and they're the officers. And so there was a couple of times where they call them red balls, where they're trying to take off and the plane's not working. And I went up on one for another squadron. Their people were deployed, so we were taking care of their planes. And I go up and this guy says, "Fix this thing, you loser. It's always broken." And I'm like, "Oh, what's going on?" And he tells me, "Oh, I'm sorry, you got to shut it down. It's going to be about 2.5 hours for us to get that fixed." And he's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." And it would have been 15 minutes, but he was a jerk, so I figured I would follow the job guides instead of do it the quick way. And so this happened for the next 3 days. Different things broke, and I'm like, "Sorry, shut it down." And a friend of mine was basically their secretary. He handled scheduling their appointments and that kind of stuff. And one of the backseaters went in swearing about me. And he says, "Geeky looking, red hair, glasses." He said, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, that's because he knows who has the power in that situation. It sure as heck ain't you guys."
How about you, Bob? What was it like being in the Army?
No regrets. It was actually one of the better decisions I had made at that point in my life. I was basically just out of high school. Economy wasn't great. Overall, it was a good decision. I have really nothing bad to say about it. So.
And you're a pretty tough guy. Like I look you standing next to Jim. Jim looks like he fixes planes. You look like you fly them.
No, I definitely don't do that.
I really like your response to being called tough, though, and I feel like that's the true defining character between a true tough guy and a guy who wants to be perceived as tough. You called him tough, and he went, He didn't go, "Yeah, I'm tough." What's up?
I knew I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of a alley, Bob, at like 2 a.m, strolling out of a bar.
Well, as long as you catch me on a good day, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So on our show, we're going to talk about a few different things over the next 2 hours. Obviously, we're going to start off with our recap, our market minute, where we talk about real estate and the trends and stats for the last week in Northwest Lake County. Then we're going to have a special discussion this week about living in incorporated versus unincorporated, and take that a step further to discussing homeowner associations and what it's like to live in them, out of them. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Should we get rid of them?
People got a lot of opinions.
Yeah, I know. And I've got opinions on those opinions, because I have opinions on everything.
Don't we all?
And what do they say opinions are like?
We can't say that word.
not on our radio station. Maybe after 10 o'clock at night. And then we're also going to have one final talk about the upcoming library referendum. Round Lake area libraries asking the public to give them $36 million. And that election is coming up real fast. What, next Tuesday?
Yep.
Yes, we blinked.
Yeah, it came quick.
I thought it was just Christmas shopping.
I know, right? Well, but it's starting to feel like spring. So I guess election season's in the air. Illinois is one of the earlier primaries in the country. So we have a long time from primary to election day. But we're going to talk about the referendum. We had put out some invitations for people to come and speak on both sides of the issue. We had several volunteers of community members who wanted to come and speak about why they didn't want the referendum. But nobody accepted our invitation to come and speak in favor of it.
Oh, man.
So what I did, in order to be fair, was I invited Jim into the studio, because Jim doesn't have a horse in the race.
Okay.
But he's one of the smartest guys in the room when it comes to understanding policy and how these referendums work and what they mean at a very minute level. So I thought having a non-emotional dollar and cents conversation with Jim would be fair, since no one was willing to come in and talk about why they should put it in. So I didn't want to give an opportunity for people to say why they shouldn't unless we had an opposing opinion. So that's why I think Jim's kind of, non-biased,
Well, welcome, Jim.
impartial.
We're excited to have you.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Great. So we're going to move along with our show, and we're going to get started right now.
Stay on top of the market with Dick Barr's Market Minute.
Dick Barr's Market Minute.
Hello, Lake County, and welcome back to Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr. We're going to go right into the Northwest Lake County. Excuse me one second. I get a lot of cameras to kind of control over here. So it's like all these buttons and these cameras and these feeds and these microphones. So let me get, boom, there we go. Okay, starting right off, we have quite a big drop in active listings this week. Kristen, last week we were sitting out in Northwest Lake County, about 135 active listings. We're down to 98 now.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so houses are moving. We're losing a lot of our inventory. Very few houses coming on the market. So in all of Northwest Lake County, and for those of you listening for the first time, first we're going to talk about the entire region of Northwest Lake County. Then we're going to break it down into 5 different communities, including Antioch, Vola, Fox Lake, and Ingleside, Grays Lake, Gurney, Lindenhurst, and then Round Lake. But in the entire area, we're sitting on 98 active listings. Only 23 new listings this week, which is about a 30% drop. Last week, we had over 30. And under contract in the past week, there were 43, which is about on track with the same number we had last week. And under contract under the past 30, get this, we have 173 houses went under contract this month. And that's a huge increase. Last month was 117, 48% increase. And compared to last year, it's even still more than last year. Last year was only 149, so 21% more houses went under contract this year than they did last year at this time. And what's amazing about that metric is we don't have any inventory. So we're selling more houses, but we have less inventory.
So, Dick, just to pose a question for our listeners, what story does that tell for people who are considering selling their house? Does that tell them that right now might not be a good time?
It tells them right now would be a great time. Best time to sell your house, as you well know, is when there's low inventory. No competition. You don't have to do as much. You're going to get more. You're not going to be asked to do certain repairs. You're not going to be asked to give Closing cost credits, well, it's not that you won't be asked, but you can say no a lot easier when there's no inventory.
I just want to make sure our listeners know that sometimes people hear what a trend is and they think that they're supposed to be following that trend. Well, no one's selling their house right now, so I think I'm supposed to wait, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Absolutely. Days on market, only 32 days on average. So house lists, the average sell time is 32 days. And in the entire region, we only have 0.6 months supply of inventory. And for those listening for the first time, month supply of inventory means if we add no new listings, how long would it take to sell the existing homes we have? Less than half a month. That means we only have half a month of inventory. So it's bad time to buy because there's not a lot of options and the prices are going up. But I don't recommend they wait either because prices are going up and rates aren't going down. Lowest priced in the region is $75,000 with the highest sold in the past 30 days, $1.8 million. That was in Antioch. Highest active on the market today is $4.5 million, and the median home price is $325,000. Now heading over to Antioch, where Antioch holds a third of all of the inventory for the region, sitting on 29 active listings. Only four new listings this week compared to 9 last week, and under contract this week only 3 compared to last week when there was 10. Under contract in the past 30 days in Antioch is 35, which is double what it was last month. And compared to last year, it's about 30% more, where last year there was only 24. Days on market's a little bit higher in Antioch, and that's because they have such a large supply of inventory. They're sitting about a month and a half on the market, 47 days, but they only have a month's supply of inventory as well. And that's down. Last week it was about 1.8 month supply. Now it's down to about half of that. Lowest price in Antioch has been $200,000 with the highest sold price of $1.8 million. Highest active on the market in Antioch is $2.8 million, but the median price $373,000. Now on over to Volo, Fox Lake, and Ingleside, where they are combined, sitting on 13 active listings. Only one new contract this week, and that's compared to 3 last week. There was new listings, I'm sorry. 1 new listing this week compared to 3 last week, but 6 under contract in the past 7 days compared to 2 last week. Under contract in the past 30 days have been 12, which is slightly up from the prior month where it was 10. Days on market sitting about 2/3 of a month, 20 days, with a month supply of inventory also below 1 month at 0.9. Lowest price is $75,000. Highest is $870,000. I wonder which one that was. It must have been a lake house on the chain. $870,000 in Fox Lake is probably going to be on the water, with the highest active property right now at $1.7 million. Average price, the median price of $355,000. Now on over to Gray's Lake, Gages Lake, Haynesville, Third Lake, and Wildwood, where they're sitting on 17 active listings. 8 new listings this week, slightly up from last week where there were 6, and under contract in the past 7 days have been 9, which is exactly the same as the prior 7 days. In the past 30 days, we've seen 28 homes go under contract, which is an increase of 10 over 18 the prior month, and their days on market average is 40 days. And their month supply of inventory, get this, and again, only half a month. Yeah, it's crazy out there. Pricing, the lowest price was $127,000 with the highest price at $432,300, with the highest active price at $1.5 million and a median price just under $300,000. Now on over to Gurnee, where Gurnee, for some reason, is just keeping very low inventory. Only 5 active houses for sale in Gurnee, single family.
Let us in.
I know, right? No one wants to leave Gurnee. I wonder why that is. People like to be close to the Six Flags, I guess. Only 1 new listing this week. Same as last week, only 1 new listing. And under contract in the past 7 days, only 3, which is a big drop from last week, where there was 8. In the past 30 days, 28 homes have gone under contract, which is about double what it was last month, where only 15 went under contract. And the days on market average is 25 and 0.2 month supply of inventory. So what is that? 6 days? So if Gurnee doesn't add any new listings, they'll be sold out of homes in 6 days, and that's crazy. $310,000 was the low price sold, and $775,000 was the high price, and the highest active right now, believe it or not, only $339,000. And the median sold price is $379,000. Now on to our backyard, Lindenhurst and Lake Villa, where we're only sitting on 14 active listings. 2 new listings this week compared to 6 last week. 9 homes have gone under contract the past 7 days compared to 7 the prior week. And this month, 28 homes have gone under contract, about 1 a day. And compared to last month, where there's a slight increase of 4, so 24 last month. Days on market average is 26 with a 0.4 month supply of inventory. Lowest price was $265,000 with a high of exactly $500,000. Highest active price home on the market right now is $4.5 million, but the median price is $316,000. Now on over to Round Lake, where only 9 houses on the market. And for such a large population, that is surprisingly low. Only 4 new listings this week, but that'll change this weekend because we're adding 2. Mm-hmm. Right? In fact, one of them, we're having a big open house this weekend.
So exciting.
Yeah, and it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be a St. Patrick's Day party. 11 homes have gone under contract in the past week, and that's about the same as the prior week, where there was 10. And under contract in the past 30 days is 36, which is about a 30% increase of last month, where it was 26. Days on market is 30 days with a 0.3 month supply of inventory. Our lowest price home sold was $85,000 with a high of $425,000, with the highest active at $424,900 and a median price of $255,000. That was and that's it. That's all we talk about. We finished at Round Lake, and let me remind myself to put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
I even said it.
You did, but I don't listen.
I know.
Bob, what are you seeing out there in the market? You do a lot over in Venetian Village, don't you?
I do, yeah. It's definitely, there's definitely a lack of inventory, and I think that has everything to do with people being locked in at low rates and knowing that if they sell and go to buy a bigger, more expensive home, they're going to be giving up a rate of 2.5%, 3%, 4%. And buying their next house at 6.5 to 7.25, and that makes a big difference. So, kind of the same story everywhere. Lack of inventory. We're fortunate that there are still people out there trying to buy, but it's very challenging for them.
Now, we talk about, I think when Sly was here last week, he called that golden handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The concept of where if you got such a great rate on your home today, that you don't want to leave because you're kind of stuck with it. But now what about maybe an empty nester who's looking to downsize from maybe high equity to something where they can use that equity to buy outright? What do you think of that?
This is a great market for them. You pretty much own this market. Mm-hmm. If you're able to sell and downsize and, ideally pay cash for the newer, smaller home, you benefit tremendously. Even if you have to take out a small mortgage, it's not the end of the world. So people looking to downsize, yes, excellent opportunities out there.
Jim, you've kind of bounced around all over the country in your service, haven't you?
I have. I was in South Dakota for a while. I was in Texas, and then Indiana, and now here.
And where's your favorite place been?
South Dakota.
Why?
Because the people tend to be nice.
Are you saying
More nice,
Illinois is
Jim.
not?
I know,
Okay.
right? Yep, I'm throwing the people in Illinois under the bus. I was there with the military, so the experience was a little bit different than here because I had a built-in group of friends when I moved there.
Yeah.
It's got the advantage of me meeting my wife in Denver and bringing her there. But
How did that first date go? Hey, nice pizza. You want to move to North Dakota?
oh my God, the first date was kind of funny. So I had just broken my glasses, and so I was wearing what we affectionately call birth control glasses in the military. Big, thick glasses. And my mom calls me up and says, "Hey, we're doing 10-mile ride in Denver, the Midnight Classic, right? And you want to ride it? Sure, no problem. Haven't showered, haven't done nothing. I look nasty. Drive on down, and that's when I met Debbie.
Oh.
And she was generous enough to say that I looked cute.
Even with the BC glasses on.
But that's what I'm saying, and with the ratty clothes and all that kind of stuff, because I was going down there to ride a bike, not, impress anybody, that kind of thing. But no, I love the tax. I love the taxation in South Dakota, which was almost nothing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Where do they get the funding for their schools?
Sales tax.
Sales tax. Interesting. Now, Jim, you ran for state rep a few years back, didn't you?
I did, because the guy who was in there was a corrupt jerk and no one was going to run against him.
Hope he's not listening.
I didn't mention any names.
Okay. One of the things that I think I admired most about you, Jim, was watching you talk at different school board meetings and kind of explain, like I learned almost everything I know about how taxation is levied through the state and the school and the different challenges that are created because of that in all the different taxing bodies we have. And you showcased an amazing capability of reading spreadsheets that I don't think anyone else in the world understood, including most of the state representatives that you had kind of spoken to.
I tried. There was, I'm trying to forget, there was a guy from down south who actually did a lot of research on the evidence-based funding model for schools.
Yeah.
And had been trying to get it put through, and for some reason the others were resistant to it. And it's a neat thing where the state does the research for the schools, and it decides how much it's going to allocate to the schools based on best practices. So the best practice, for instance, if it says that the student-to-teacher ratio should be somewhere between 15 and 20, and the school has X amount of students, then the state is going to allocate 50% of the cost of
Jim,
getting to
it
that.
was a yes or no question.
Sorry.
It's only a 2-hour show.
Sorry. So yes, they were able to use what I had and get their stuff approved.
I think we should bring you back for the Masterminds show, though, so when
Sorry.
we really dive deep.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to get into was you lived in all those areas, and you said you liked North Dakota, and because South Dakota, I'm sorry.
North Dakota is hell.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's got both the worst, and it has the worst weather in the summer and the worst weather in the winter of anywhere in the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Now, mind you, my wife's in-laws are going to be mad at me, but I don't.
But South Dakota, you said, had a very low tax rate. And I'm assuming their bureaucracy was probably a bit smaller than it is here in Illinois.
There's almost no bureaucracy, yes.
So that kind of leads me to what we're going to talk about today, which is living in different types of voluntary government bodies. So you can, in Illinois here, you can live in an incorporated community. You can live in an unincorporated community, or you can get even more restrictive and move into a HOA. Mm-hmm. And so, Bob, I'm really glad you're here. I think you're our unincorporated representative. You live in Venetian Village. You've been selling in Venetian Village for decades.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about why unincorporated might be a better option than incorporated.
It's really more of a personal preference. If you're somebody who likes a bit more open space, larger yards, that type of thing, unincorporated might be a good fit for you. One good example would be if you drove through Venetian Village and crossed over Grand Avenue in Lindenhurst into the first neighborhood you come to, you'll see a big difference in housing density. A lot of the homes in Venetian Village are on 2 or 3 lots. They're a bit more spread out. As soon as you cross Grand Avenue, you'll see it's a lot more just houses on single lots, and there are reasons for that. But generally speaking, that's a good rule of thumb that unincorporated tends to be a little more of a country feel for a lot of people.
Now, let's talk about the things that scare people about unincorporated, which is, if I'm working with clients, they considering unincorporated, a lot of things they mention are, we're afraid of a well and we're afraid of a septic. Should they or shouldn't be? Shouldn't they be?
It really depends. I think for a lot of people, if it's explained properly to them and they see the numbers and how things actually work, They tend to become a little less afraid of that. It's been several years since I've looked at the statistics, but I know years ago I read somewhere that about 70% of the homes in this country are on septic systems as opposed to city sewer. When you start looking at the cost of, putting in a new well, for example, if you compare that to having a water bill of, $150, $200 a month, which I've heard of some people having that, you start running the numbers and you realize that at that expense, every 3 or 4 years, you would have paid enough to put a new well in. So, it's you just have to look at everything in context.
That's a great point you bring up, actually. So my mom grew up in Venetian Village, right over off of Parma.
Oh, okay.
And she doesn't currently live in a house that has, sorry, I'm getting a little loud there. She doesn't currently live in a house that has well water, but she is always encouraging. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and she is always encouraging us to look for a house on well water. She's like, I wouldn't give to not have a water bill anymore.
Sure.
Well water is no big deal. I grew up with it all the time. So some people love it.
Now, Kristen, you're a good representative today for someone who lives in a HOA.
I am.
So what's that like for you?
There's ups and downs. For sure. It can be argued that living in an area with an HOA can keep the home value up because they're holding everyone in the neighborhood to a minimum standard of care for their homes, right? Because what some of you might not know is that when we are listing your home and figuring out the correct price to list it for, we are taking into consideration what it's going to appraise for once it's under contract. The way that that price gets determined has something to do, I'm not going to say it's entirely related to it, but it is a non-zero amount of related to how much other homes in the area are selling for. So if the houses in your neighborhood are not being kept up well and they're selling for a lower price, you're going to have a harder time getting what your home could be worth when it's your time to sell. So there is something to be said about that. However, there's also something...
No, hold on. I want to address that real quick because we had recently one of our teammates, Ken Bryant, was selling a home over in Spring Grove. It was unincorporated area, and I don't know if you were out to the house across the street. It looked like you might be too young to remember Sanford and Son, but
I'm familiar with it.
You're familiar with it. The house was literally like a junkyard. But the guy that lived there was super nice guy, super nice family that lived there, and sometimes we'll even go over and we'll talk to the neighbors, say, hey, we're selling your neighbor's house, would you mind cleaning it up? Because the cleaner your yard is, the more likely you are to get a great neighbor. But that was not possible in this house. Even the county had come out and cited them for the cleaning it up, but there was so much junk around that there's nothing they can do. Whereas in a homeowners association, you're not likely to enter that scenario.
Now that being said, being held to that minimum standard can also sometimes be a hardship on people. There was one time a few years back where we had been cited by our HOA for having a crack in one of our windows when I lived in a townhome. And the crack happened because of, it was during a polar vortex. We had a bunch of crazy temperatures going up and down. We just had a random crack in the window. And we had gotten a letter in the mail, I think like within 3 days of that crack happening, because this HOA is on top of things. They are driving around looking for reasons to tell people what to do. But we had gotten a letter in the mail, and it said that you have X amount of time to fix this window, otherwise you're going to be fined. So we were put in a position where we had to, at the time, try and make a fix that we couldn't afford to avoid having to pay fines that we also could not afford for not being able to afford the correction. Now, granted, I understand that people don't want to live in a neighborhood with a bunch of cracked windows. So I see both sides of that, but the power that HOAs can have to tell you do this or else is what I think puts bad taste in a lot of people's mouths when it comes to what they can and can't do.
Now, when you bought your house, were you aware of these rules and restrictions?
I was aware that we were in an HOA. It was my first home, so I didn't totally understand what that meant. We had the rules provided to us, and being 20-something years old, I kind of briefly looked through it. So No, I didn't fully know, but it's not because the information wasn't provided to me.
So that's interesting, and that's an honest answer. So the education, so the knowledge was there, but maybe the education wasn't.
Sure.
So, okay, so yes, it's almost kind of like when you open up a new software package or you go online, it says, do you agree to the terms and conditions? And you click on the link, it's like 4,000 pages
You're
long.
like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure, it makes sense to me. But let me ask you this question. When you were looking at homes, seeing the uniformity and the cleanliness of the community that you were buying into, was it a deciding factor in what helped you decide to buy there?
Seeing how clean and well kept the neighborhood was the reason that we bought the place that we did in that neighborhood. It was beautiful. It looked and felt safe. It was safe. It is safe. I feel safe walking around there with my kids all day. There's 2 parks in that neighborhood. Absolutely, the fact that it's well maintained contributed to what I was willing to pay to live there.
Yeah, and your house is gorgeous and it's beautiful. And I know when I drive down that road, I like seeing the way those homes are positioned. And so it's like with anything, you got to take the good with the bad and the bad with the good, and you're going to see both. Bob, the Venetian Village, you don't so much have a homeowners association, but isn't there a civic organization there?
There is. There's a voluntary association, basically $25 a year. It's pretty informal. They have meetings once a month, just to kind of get the word out of what's going on. But it's definitely not what you would think of when somebody says HOA.
Now, do they have any rules and restrictions for your properties?
Not really. They're pretty easygoing when it comes to that. I think if somebody is doing something they shouldn't be, the recourse for a neighbor would be to call the county, get the county involved, which, they'll do something. It'll probably take a bit more time than if you were in a neighborhood with a very strict HOA, but that's kind of how things would work, in a neighborhood like that.
Bob, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Following up on saying what someone shouldn't be doing. What does that look like in Venetian Village? Because in an HOA neighborhood, I can give you a lot of very tiny examples of what someone shouldn't be doing. But I think that looks different in an area like Venetian Village. What would that look like to you?
A good example would be, it was several months ago, but I saw somebody post on Facebook in our neighborhood page about a guy whose front yard was basically like a junkyard, lots of cars, lots of junk, and they ended up, calling the county, and I think they at least somewhat resolved that. But I mean, to give an example, like you said, with a broken window, that you'd never hear about that in my neighborhood.
Interesting.
So.
What about planting the wrong flowers? Because that's a thing in our neighborhoods.
No, we don't have anything like that.
I love that for you guys.
Yeah.
I was just down in Tampa visiting my sister. Her and her husband have a place down there, and it's a HOA, but a single family home HOA. And she's got these little plastic palm trees. They're not palm trees, but the little plastic palmy things. But they look ridiculous. They're sun faded and everything. And I pointed to her. I said, "Are those real or fake?" And she says, "Oh no, they're fake because they're only part timers there. They do half the year down. They're snowbirds." And she says, "Yeah, we pulled out the HOA approved plants right away and put in the stuff that we don't have to maintain." But the guys, I know the time always flies here, but we got to take a quick break. But we'll be back in just a minute.
See you soon.
Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr will return in just a few moments after these important messages. Don't touch that dial.
It's time for real estate trivia.
What is a property's market value minus any debts called? The answer when we return.
One station, all the hits. Hits.
98.3.
The Life.
St. Gilbert's Catholic Church in Grays Lake reminds the class of 2024. Each year, over half of all traffic
to the second half hour of Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr. I'm here with everyone who was kind enough to stay for the second half hour. We got Kristen, Jim, and Bob. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
And if you ever wonder why do radio hosts do that? They say, hey, give us some speech. When they come back from a break. And I'll tell you why I do it. I don't know why real professionals do it, but I can tell you why amateurs do it.
Dick, this is our, fourth episode? We are real professionals now.
We are, right? Except no one paying us to do it. So, but I do it because I want to make sure your mics are on. So that's my easy way of telling. So we do have lights that kind of tell us, but it's always nice to confirm that we're not screwing up. Anyway, so we're in the middle of I think a really good discussion about incorporated versus unincorporated, and then HOAs. And what's cool is I live in incorporated around Lake Beach. I do not have an HOA. Bob lives in unincorporated Lake Villa.
Wait, hold on. Your neighborhood doesn't have an HOA?
No.
I want to talk about that later.
Perfect. It's one of the best selling points of Country Walk.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it feels like an HOA community, but it's definitely not.
We're going to need to talk about that.
And then Kristen has an HOA.
I do.
Yeah, so I think this is great. We got three perspectives here, and I to be honest, I see the pros and cons of all of them. Tell you, as much as I understand, I would not want to pay for a high water bill. I also the concept of a well kind of scares me. And the concept of a septic system kind of scares me. Have you ever been to one of those restaurants where it just stinks like sewer?
I worked at one of those restaurants.
Did you really?
I'm not going
Don't
to
say who
which
it
one.
is.
I won't say which one.
Please. Yeah, they might be a sponsor. But kind of, Kristen, let's go back to, because you had said something right before we went away that made me laugh. And let's evaluate that, because I think that's one of the education aspects. A lot of people understand what an HOA is, but they don't realize to the extent of what their restrictions will be. And the thing that you said before we left was about you're planting the wrong flowers. Talk about that.
That was a real thing that happened. So I spoke with 97 people previous to this episode we did. I really wanted to get the opinions of my neighbors. I wanted to get the opinions of people in surrounding towns that we serve and homes that we sell. I really wanted to know how they felt about their HOAs, and that was a real story, that someone had been fined $25 a day until they took the flowers out of their garden because they were not approved flowers. That was a real thing.
$25 a day, and those fines are they're real. And what's interesting about it, if you don't pay those, the HOA could lien the property, and they could actually foreclose on you.
They sure can. It's crazy. I can't possibly understand how that's legal, but it is.
Well, it's all in how the condominium or the HOA or the PUD docs were filed when the development was created.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's another story that I was told by someone who lives in an HOA where they don't allow work vans to be visible. So
that's common.
You can't. I know, and I have a hard time understanding that one. I don't think any neighbor has a problem with finding out that their neighbor has a job.
Well, you have to understand when HOAs first started, they were more about people who wanted to live in exclusive communities. So I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Long Island, and they had these exclusive communities with these big, beautiful homes at the time. $100,000 homes, that's where the wealthy people live, and they did not want work vans in there because they didn't want to be considered a blue class community. They wanted to be exclusive. So a lot of those restrictions come from that kind of feeling of desired exclusivity.
Absolutely. This person specifically, in an attempt to respect that rule, went and got a blank white van. No markings on it whatsoever, and was still being fined daily for just simply having it in his driveway.
Did it have commercial plates? Do you know?
I don't know for sure, but I do know.
Because that's usually the requirement is whether if it has commercial plates, it could still be restricted.
Okay, all right. Well, there's two things that I want to touch on, though. So out of those 97 people, I want you to guess how many people said that they felt that the services that they received and the value that being in a neighborhood that maintains your home value brings to your life was worth the, what they said, petty, we're just going to say fines, were worth the fees and the fines and the stress and the strict rules that they were under. I want you to guess how many people said that it felt worth it to them.
Bob, what's your guess?
I would guess 10, and that might be being generous.
Okay.
Jim, what's your guess?
I was going to say it's around 15 to 20.
Okay.
And I'm going to wager a guess 0.
Well, Price is Right rules. Dick is the only one who got it. It was 4 people out of 97 people.
Wow.
97 people out of them.
The 4 who said they appreciated the value, did they go into any details about the things they did like?
All 4 of them live in Vernon Hills in much more expensive neighborhoods and
So,
receive
exclusivity.
a lot. Yep, and receive a lot of services.
Yeah. So it is interesting to me. So I understand the folks who want to build an area where they feel they're exclusive, and that's why you've got gated communities, what have you. But in areas like ours that generally tend to be more middle income, high, lower, middle, and then low, upper, where we have a large blue collar community, I don't find that same need for that type of exclusivity here, because you get that from even my community, which is Country Walk, where just people's desire to maintain their homes and look good are appreciated. Although, Jim, I kind of remember something going back quite a while. You had an issue. We don't have an HOA. You live in Country Walk. You had, was it someone on Facebook complaining about your bushes?
They were complaining about my backyard.
How did they see your backyard?
Well, they lived next door.
Oh, they were neighbors. Okay.
Yeah.
And what were they complaining about?
So I had been mowing my lawn, and my lawnmower died. And I took it into a place to get it fixed, and it took a couple of weeks to get it fixed.
How dare you?
Oh, I know. And so the backyard looked like it hadn't been mowed in 4 weeks, because it hadn't. And the front yard, because we didn't have a whole lot of rain, still looked okay. And he posted on Facebook, "Hey, just out of curiosity, I'm wondering if that Round Lake resident, or that Round Lake ordinance about yards applies only to things that you can see from the street and not someone's backyard."
Okay. So that brings up a good point, because we already have ordinances. We have planning and zoning departments, and there are ordinances. Obviously, they don't restrict the type of vegetation, but they do have weed prohibitions. You can't have grass taller than 8 inches in your front yard.
No, that's local flora.
Right. So I would say that probably the grasses that we put on our front yard are probably not indigenous species to the area. That would be I doubt Kentucky blue. Kentucky blue is native to the prairies of Illinois. But
so I have a question. I'm
yeah.
sorry. So for you also live in Country Walk?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question for the two of you then, because I did not realize that your neighborhood does not have an HOA.
Okay.
Do you feel that living in a neighborhood without an HOA gives you a stronger sense of personal pride taking care of your neighborhood and taking care of your home? And then a follow-up question to that is, do you feel that your neighbors also get that sense of pride?
Jim,
As
I'm going to
opposed
let
to being
you
told to do
answer that
things.
first, because I have my own opinions.
Okay, so I've never lived in an HOA, so I don't know what that's like.
Sure.
So not being in an HOA doesn't give me a greater sense of pride. However, making sure that it's maintained and that kind of stuff does.
Okay.
So, and Jim's scenario kind of like points to, you also have, with all these neighborhood Facebook groups, there's this public shaming aspect of maintenance. But another thing to consider when we talk about the HOAs, and maybe something people don't necessarily realize, it's not always homeowners living in the homes in those
Correct.
areas. And oftentimes it's renters. Renters, on average, and very generally speaking, don't tend to take the same pride of ownership care of homes. So those HOA restrictions do protect against landlords renting it out and not maintaining that as if they did live there. So there's another aspect to that.
Okay. Another thing that I want to touch on. So earlier before the break, Dick, you had asked me if I knew what I was getting into upon moving into my neighborhood that had an HOA, and I told you honestly, not really. I was provided the information, but I was in my 20s, and I didn't really read through it, so I didn't totally understand how strict the boundaries were going to be. And I think that that's an important key to a lot of the, honestly, almost visceral anger that I was able to sort of pick up on.
Visceral anger?
There were people who were very upset, even just being asked to talk about how they feel about an HOA.
As a former politician, I hear and feel that.
And I think that part of what could maybe help that a little bit, because I know it kind of sounds like maybe I'm ragging on HOAs altogether, and I promise you I'm really not. And I think that something that might help would be taking the time to educate yourself, right? So that means reading through your rules so that you know what you're getting into. It also means maybe attending the meetings so that you know what's being talked about in the first place. It also means getting involved if you feel like things aren't being done right. It's your neighborhood. Try and take some control over it.
Do these people realize, do the ones who are so opposed to the HOAs realize that they are, just like in our local governments, it is a government of the people, by the people. Do the folks who are opposed to HOAs realize that they have just as much power to effectuate change in those HOAs by running to be on those boards?
I don't think they do. I feel like that might not be a completely fair statement because they can't foreclose on their houses back at them, like whereas an HOA can retaliate.
No, that's not my point.
Oh, okay.
No, my point is that those HOA boards are made up of the residents of the communities they serve, and every homeowner in those associations can run for positions on the board, and because democracy does rule in those HOAs, they have the power of it's work.
It is work.
They have the power to get in there and make changes, and I'm curious if they're aware that they do have that ability.
I can't speak on that. I don't know for sure that they do. I can tell you that there are, I believe, 2 or 3 vacant seats in my area's homeowners association. There's a lot of complaining about the way that things are being ran, and hopefully that turns into discussions about how things can become better in the future.
I had a conversation last week with a friend of both of ours, Bob, Mr. Muggs.
Sure.
And that's a pseudonym, so I'm not giving away anything here. And he's a president of an HOA over in Lindenhurst. And what I found interesting is they have very strict design standards over there where he lives, that they can't even change the color of their houses. Very strict. But the way the HOA was drafted, they require 75% of the homeowners have to approve a change. Not 75% of the board, not 75% of the homeowners present at the meeting. 75% of the homeowners have to approve any change to the design standards. Wow. And he said any change, and that part just that doesn't sound practical. So I'm thinking maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle between any change and just certain changes, because that would completely restrict the board from doing anything when it came to even operation and maintenance of the association. But yeah, he's saying 75% need to say aye to approve any changes.
Interesting.
And imagine not being able to choose, the color of your house.
Well, and that's kind of what I mean when I talked about personal pride in neighborhoods that don't have an HOA and don't have any requirements on what you can and can't do to your own home. When you're only given 1 or 2 choices of what you can do with the outside of your home and you don't like either of them, I mean, how much pride are you really taking in doing that at that point? Now, that being said, I do also want to talk about reasons why an HOA might be beneficial to someone. There are people in different circumstances where having things like snow removal and landscaping provided to you can be really helpful, right? If you're a single mom. I know when I was a mom of a newborn baby and my husband was working all the time, I would not have had, it would have been very inconvenient or hard for me to be able to just get out in the middle of the night and shovel snow all night, right? So, if you're elderly or if you're someone who is disabled and you're not able to do those things for yourself, living in an HOA might be a great option for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. But all of those services are, you're paying dearly for them. The minimum HOA that I'm aware of is at least $200 a month if it's an HOA that includes property maintenance, and that's landscaping and snow removal.
Correct. The current national average is $375 a month.
So, okay, yeah, and around here, I think, like I said, the lowest I've seen was about $200, but I think you're closer to right on the average home is going to be between 300 and 500. And if you extrapolate that out over a year, you're talking about $3,600 to $5,000 or $6,000 a year, where it's considerably less expensive to have, to hire a landscaper and snow removal.
It is, and they don't come around taking pictures of all the things wrong with your house and fine you for it.
True.
I'm sure it's a fine line finding an HOA that provides some benefit versus one that's completely overbearing and wants to dictate everything about what you can and can't do. If somebody were looking for a home and considering buying into a neighborhood with an HOA, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to, approach some of the people in the local Facebook groups. Hey, I'm thinking about moving in here. If anyone lives here, do you have any feedback on the HOA? So at least they kind of know going in what to expect.
That brings me to something that I see happen a lot that I think it's worth discussing. You see a lot of people who live in a community trash talking it on social media.
All the time.
You'll see people in an HOA trash talking. You see people being maybe negatively affected by a government policy decision, trash talking their community. And they all say the same thing. This is going to lower our property values. The reality is the only thing lowering the property values is you screaming about it and telling the world how terrible it is. Because, we've seen, Bob, you've been in the business 30 years?
34 years.
34 years.
Yeah.
I just turned 35. That's intimidating, Bob.
And this is my 20th year, and we've got the benefit of seeing before major decisions, during major decisions, and after major decisions that affect local real estate. And the after effect is always nothing like the people were warning or predicting would be a result. Do you remember when they were doing the Millburn bypass?
Oh, yeah.
Over in Lindenhurst?
Yeah.
The government owned this swath of land. What the intent was to move or relocate 45 so it didn't have to go through downtown Millburn. And you saw it right along Haven Lane. You saw all these houses in a line on Haven Lane, and then this huge opening space. And, the people who had lived in those houses were not the original owners, because the original owners knew exactly why that land was there. They knew a road was coming. But the people who had bought it subsequently, they weren't aware of that, and no one went out of their way to tell them that this is the future home of, of a 4-lane highway, a divided highway. And they were very loud about this is going to, lower our values. At the time, I was working with a buyer who was interested in a home there. This is before it really blew up.
Okay.
I wasn't even aware that the plans were already in place to start construction shortly. And we got under contract on one of those homes, tucked away further back, away from where the proposed road was. And once they found out about all of this happening, they killed the offer. And this was, at the time, houses were selling for about low 300s. They canceled their offer. They wound up buying somewhere else where this wasn't going to be an issue. But what killed that deal was all of these people screaming at the top of their lungs how terrible this is going to be. So a lot of deals died, and people's values plummeted as a result of that conversation. Now they put that road in. I don't know if everything's great, but everything's moving fluid. You don't have those huge backups along, downtown Millburn anymore. But now those homes are selling for over $500,000.
How often do you hear those same residents going online talking about how great it is now? Almost never. It's a shame. It's unfortunate that the only opinion you ever hear is the one that's screaming the loudest about how bad everything is.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And they're really shooting themselves in the foot when it comes to equity and value.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't fight for what you believe in, but I say to a lot of people who are complaining, do something about it.
Yeah.
Show up to the board meetings. Make your voice heard. I know, Jim, I'm speaking to the choir with you on this. That's how you and I met. You and I met while we were doing the same thing on what we deemed to be a terrible school board decision.
It actually was a terrible school board decision. We thought about it. It was empirically bad, and they didn't consider a lot of things that we said would happen, that have happened, that would have made things a lot easier if they hadn't done it the way they did it. But I shouldn't say too much. I do have a personal stake in the board over there. So,
do you want to share why?
Yeah, my wife's on the board. Naturally, she joined the board after they made the terrible decision because she was sick of seeing the terrible decisions.
She decided to do something about it.
Yep,
Exactly.
I respect that.
And she's funny because she is very conscientious about being on the board, but she likes to say that she just says no. Doesn't think about it. She says no first, and they have to convince her why it's not no.
You know what?
Which is great.
I think that's a brilliant way to be in charge of policy. That's kind of how my wife and I, if I ask for something, 99% of the time I'm asking for something stupid, frivolous, and we don't need it. So her automatic response is no. And then she might think about it and might realize, oh, well, actually, it makes sense, but it's safer to say no first because chances are no's the right answer, and you give yourself time to think about why it should be yes. And that's how I think more government officials should think.
And if I can say something about the government in Illinois,
They might
just
be
really
listening.
quick, our school board almost went to jail a few years ago because the Illinois government said that if you don't vote for the prevailing wage law, you can go to jail, but you can vote no or yes on it. It's your call.
Wow.
And
No pressure.
and they voted no.
Yeah, once.
And then they had there was an emergency board meeting from the lawyer saying, you guys could go to jail for real if you do this. You have a chance to not go to jail if you switch.
Wow.
And then all of the school boards and other smaller governments lobbied like crazy to get that thing changed. And the change that they did was not to give them the option to do it without going to jail. It was simply to take the option away and say, you will adhere to the prevailing wage.
Right, which actually makes much more sense than the other way that they had it. And for those who don't know, prevailing wage is a state law that says any government entity must pay prevailing wage for any work that it contracts out. So and prevailing wage is a wage that's pretty much set by labor unions, right? It says, well, what is the typical rate at which the hourly rate of pay for a plumber is, or for a finish contractor, or for an electrician, and then they don't require that you hire a union firm to do the work, but they require that you pay it as if it was a union, so the same fees. So I've got friends who are contractors who do both government work and non-government work, and when they're doing a private job, they pay a rate, but then when they're so the same painter or the same electrician working this job gets paid, I don't know the numbers, $25 an hour. But when he's working on that job, he's getting $60 an hour or $80 an hour, depending on what that is. So that's what prevailing wage is in the state of Illinois. Said every governing body must vote to approve it. So you have a choice of yes or no. But if you say no, Jim was correct. It's a criminal offense.
Wow.
And I was very proud of the District 41 School Board who took a stand, and I believe the vote was 4-3. To not approve the prevailing wage, not because they were necessarily opposed to prevailing wage or not. The statement was, we don't like being told how we have to vote.
The approach. Yeah.
If you're going to give me a chance to vote, well then, and it's the state's way of deferring responsibility for the prevailing wage. So I agree with the way it is now, which is, if it's the state's law, then the state should make that decision. It shouldn't be pushed onto or forced onto other beings for the sole purpose of making it look like it's a democracy.
Agree, and now it hasn't been, which is good. Now,
Correct.
Now they're on the state has to be responsible for it, state government.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would even call that a vote.
Exactly.
If.
Right, which is why I was so proud of them. My wife was one who voted no to it. It's like,
Good.
you bet. Go to jail. I'll support you.
Yeah.
It's like voting for Khrushchev. You didn't have a choice.
Right, and that's totally wrong.
Bob, are you going to be sticking around for a second hour?
I'm going to have to cut out in a little bit. But
Okay, I've got a follow-up question when we come back from our next
Sure.
break I want to get back to talking about unincorporated versus unincorporated very briefly, because I know we actually have more things to cover today.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll do a quick. We're going to take a break. We'll get you back in. We'll talk a little bit more unincorporated because I think that's the just, and then we're going to get into the library funding bill. Jim, are you going to be able to stick around for a little more?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Everyone, thank you very much. We're going to come back for the second hour of Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr in just a moment.
Talking Lake County with Dick Barr will return in just a few moments after these important messages. Don't touch that dial.
It's time for real estate trivia. What term defines a mortgage whose interest rate stays the same for the duration of the loan? What term defines a mortgage after we return. Whose interest rate stays the same for the duration of the loan? The answer after we return.
You just want The Life. More of the music you
St.
love.
Gilbert's Catholic Church in Grays Lake reminds the class of 2024. Each year, over half of all traffic fatalities involve teenage drivers. During your prom and graduation festivities, remember all traffic fatalities involve teenage drivers. During your prom and graduation festivities, remember all traffic fatalities involve teenage drivers. During your prom and graduation remember, all traffic fatalities involve teenage drivers. During your prom and graduation prevention, treatment, and public awareness, deaths due to lung, colon, breast, and prostate cancers are being reduced. Cancer is a tough topic for people to confront, but if you take the time to be informed, you can greatly reduce your risk. This from Oganoff Auction Service in Round Lake, working to make our community even better. Remember, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure.
And now for today's trivia answer. The term for a mortgage whose interest rate stays the same for the duration of the loan is a fixed rate mortgage. The term for a mortgage whose interest rate stays the same for the duration of the loan is a fixed rate mortgage.
Welcome back to Unlocking Lake County with your host, Dick Barr.
Okay, and we're back. I got to figure out what's causing that strange loop. So I apologize. I don't know how annoying that was listening to it for you folks, but thanks for putting up with us. We're in our second hour of Unlocking Lake County, and we're lucky we still have Kristen with us and Jim Walsh with us and Bob Link. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
You know what? You are lucky to have me.
Yes, very, very lucky. I always tell everyone, it says, you have enough empathy for both of us, so it allows me to kind of focus on the dollars and cents. I love it.
For better or worse.
Yeah, so today we were originally going to be finished with our HOA versus unincorporated versus incorporated conversation, and then head straight into the library bond referendum. But I think we've got a little bit more. A lot of people online asking questions. So, Kristen, I know you had a few more questions you wanted to ask Bob about unincorporated.
I do. So, Bob, I have a handful of buyers that I'm working with this spring and summer that are a little apprehensive to look into unincorporated areas.
Okay.
And the reasons that they've cited have been things like being worried about not getting certain services, having trouble getting police out to their house if they need them, being worried that it's going to take an extra long time for ambulances, that the neighborhoods won't look nice. They don't want to deal with crazy neighbors. Can you kind of talk about that and
Sure.
either prove or disprove or prove whether or not those are true?
Sure. As far as services, obviously that depends a lot on where you're at. If you're in a remote area that's very far from everything, that could be a valid concern. Where I'm at, it's not a concern at all because we've got services through the county. We're not far from really anything. So, Grand Avenue from my house is half a mile away, and once you hit Grand Avenue, you're kind of in.
You're in it.
Yeah. So, no, as far as I'm concerned, where I live, it's not an issue at all. We've got Lake County, who they're the ones who patrol our streets, and you see them pretty frequently. I've lived there since I was a kid, and I can tell you back then, you might see a squad car go through once a month. Of course, it was much quieter back then, so probably not the need. But no, public services, that's a non-issue. As far as the neighborhood being, somewhere you want to live, the internet's great. It's really made things very convenient, very easy. But there's also a lot to be said for getting in the car and just taking a drive and, finding areas that you think you would like and then kind of digging into them a bit further to see if it's somewhere you'd want to live.
Absolutely. What do you think the profile of a person who would love living in an unincorporated area would look like? What is that person?
Probably somebody who wants to be, not house on top of house, neighbors, 20 feet away from them. They want to be a little bit more spread out. Personally, I'm on about a half acre. On a nice summer day, I kind of enjoy getting on the riding mower and cutting my grass. And, it's just, we're basically self-governed. So people kind of leave you alone for the most part, which a lot of people like that. If you want to live somewhere that you're kind of micromanaged, that might not be for you, So it really comes down to personal preference.
Okay, great. And then the other thing that I had one more question for you. I know the answer to it, but just so that our listeners can get this cleared up. You had mentioned that the county takes care of a lot of the services for your specific area.
Yes.
Do you know if that's common in general for unincorporated areas for those responsibilities to fall on the county?
Not always the county. Sometimes it's at the township level.
Okay.
For example, all the streets in Venetian Village, with the exception of the county road, which is Granada, Genoa, Nathan Hale, Ingle Drive, every other street in there is basically maintained by the Lake Villa Township as far as snow removal and, culverts, things like that. So, on the county takes care of their roads, and then the township takes care of theirs. So it is a little split up.
Okay, great. I think that answers all the questions I have.
So, that brings up a fair point, too, of what's been happening over the past decades is as time progresses, more and more autonomy of these unincorporated areas is disappearing, right? I think a perfect example is a couple years ago, the county board, to which I served on, voted a majority of the county board members voted to eliminate open burning. So unincorporated leaf removal was done primarily by burning, throwing the leaves into a ditch and then setting it on fire. But the county board, the representatives of which represent a majority of the incorporated areas of the county, voted to eliminate the township's ability to burn. And then they also forced them into a garbage collection contract. Now, Lake Villa Township wasn't subject to that because they already had a franchise agreement, I think, with Groot, right? You guys are with Groot, or are you Waste Management?
We are Waste Management.
You're Waste Management?
Yeah.
So they weren't subject because they had their own franchise agreement in place. But the county, for the rest of the county, for all unincorporated areas, now have the north of Lake County has one garbage collection servicer, and then the south of the county has another. I think Lakes Sanitation is the south, and I think Groot is the north.
In the village, Lake Villa Township actually has a truck that goes around and sucks up the leaves. They do that for every street in the neighborhood, with the exception of the county roads, which I happen to live on.
That's a cool thing to watch. My mother-in-law, she lives in Grays Lake, and she's got the same service. It's so neat.
Yeah, it's great that they're doing that, but for somebody like me who lives on a county road, the county doesn't provide any such service. And I can tell you that there's a whole bunch of people in the village who, we've heard about the ban, but they're still doing what we've always done, which is, in the fall, if you've got a dozen mature trees, you'd be out there for weeks trying to bag those. So you pile them up and you burn them. And,
Now, Bob, was the leaf sucking something they've always done, or is that
No.
something they did in response to the county's ban?
Yeah, I think that was in response to the ban. As far as I know, they just started that last year.
And that was Jim Jorgensen who
Correct.
put that in place, right? He's
Yes.
the commissioner of the highway department.
Yes. Yeah, he takes great care of the people in the neighborhood, for sure.
That's one thing I'll say. The Venetian Village, they love Jim. Jim lives in the in the village, and they absolutely love him. And when I would talk to people in Venetian Village, Jim's the kind of guy that he would come and how anytime there's a snow and the municipal plows come through and they block everyone's driveways, Jim would go around to village residents and he would open up their aprons. So after the plows came through, he'd bring in a small truck and clear out the aprons for people so they didn't have to dig out. I don't know if he did it for everyone's or just seniors.
A lot of people. He's just super helpful. If somebody has an issue, he'll give them his cell phone number, and I've had him call me before. If I expressed an opinion online that was a concern, he would call me and talk about it. So just as far as public servants go, I think he's great.
Just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Bob Link, managing broker, owner of Village Realty in Lindenhurst, on the corner of Grand and Granada at 1915 East Grand Avenue. I want to thank you very much. Without telling people to go to it, without a call to action, you want to share your web address if people want to know more information about you?
Sure. It's boblink.com. That's Linke. And I've got several other URLs that will direct you to the same page, lindenhurstrealtor.com, antiochrealtor.com, lakevillarealtor.com.
Grumpy old Army veteran.com.
Haven't registered that one yet, but good idea.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob,
Thank
for joining
you.
us. Really
Thank you.
appreciate
It was
it.
a pleasure.
Great. So, guys, now let's get into the discussion, Jim, kind of why you're here. Let's talk about the library referendum that they're wanting to put through.
Okay, so I did a little bit of reading while we were talking about it, and it sounds like they did one of those. It sounds like they did a needs assessment to see how they could improve, and that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to comment on the Round Lake one right now. I'm going to comment on two things that have been recently done that I've gone through in the last 10 years. One of them was the Lake Villa District schools and their referendum, and the second was our library building a new library without a referendum.
And that would be the Lake Villa District Library.
Sorry, Lake Villa District Library. Yep. So they did the Round Lake Library is talking about this needs assessment that was done by contractors, and we went through the same thing. They did the schools did their thing before they went for the referendum.
Question, if you don't mind. Needs assessment by contractors, the same contractors who would be awarded the bid to do the work, or is this independent? Do you know?
I don't know if it is or isn't.
Okay.
But I guess my perspective is, if you're only getting it from a certain type of person, I'm not saying that they're bad, good people whatsoever, but if I'm a medical physicist, so if someone comes in with certain symptoms, I'm going to be like, oh, that person has cancer and I can treat it with radiation because that's what I know, right?
Way to
Right.
casually drop, I'm a medical physicist. My God.
So
My son would call that a flex.
It is a flex.
actually, I didn't mean for it to be honest. It
No,
was just an
for you. You
example.
should flex.
We
Flex
know
all the
you
time.
enough to know. You treat your brain the same way Bob treats his muscles. He's very humble about them.
So when they only get one group of people to say this is what's needed, they're going to say what you need is construction work done. You're going to need this expensive stuff done
Right.
and that kind of stuff because that's what I know to do to fix a problem.
Right.
And we saw that with the referendum that the schools did. They went for this Cadillac thing when there were other things that could have been done, and we actively fought against a referendum.
Successfully.
Yep. And then they actually did the work of seeing, okay, what actually needs to be done and then what can be done to fix it within a reasonable price. And when they did that, we helped them pass that referendum,
That's correct.
right?
I think they first asked for $50+ million. We assessed it. We looked at it. It didn't appear to be answering a lot of what the public was asking for. It mostly satisfied what the contractors were hoping for. They failed on that referendum. I believe 68% voted against it, which is a tough thing to do because a lot of people, everyone loves their schools, right? And they want to give the schools what they want. But unfortunately, sometimes governing bodies sell these as emotional pleas instead of giving the actual facts and figures, what it means, and what are some of the alternatives, because they don't do a good enough job investigating those. But they came back, like you said, I thought that what they needed could be done for about $26 million. They came back at about $32 million, I believe, and that was close enough. Could I fought another round to get them to go down to 26? Maybe I could have, maybe would have succeeded, but I thought it was close enough. I felt we saved $18 million for the district. The schools got everything they needed for the safety, for the education aspects that they wanted to, and I think it was a fair compromise.
Agreed. Yep. And so that was my first experience with the referendum as a citizen. And then our library tax is high in Lake Villa.
It is?
Yes. According to what I saw. Comparatively, yep.
Okay.
According to what I saw online, as of 2022, we were tied for the highest rate at about 5.5.
I'm surprised to hear that because
0.055 or
my tax that I pay to the library district is a relatively low. I think it's about $350 a year. And the same value in Round Lake would currently be paying $450. So I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, Round Lake's percentage is less, so they're paying less than us. Like you're right. It's the same percentage of Round Lake for how much they have. They would be paying more in an actual number, but our rate's higher.
Okay.
Their assessed value as of 2020 was around. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember because I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Okay.
Their
Equalized assessed value.
right was higher than ours,
Okay.
and so they had less of a percentage, but we're paying more for the library,
Gotcha.
that kind of thing. And so our library is able to save money for capital improvements and not have to go to referendum because of how much higher the base rate is, kind of a thing.
Okay.
And so more power to them, right? But
And it wasn't without its controversy at the
Right.
time.
well, yeah, that they could. And I'm going to say that the timing of it was interesting for my family because my kids were just getting old enough that we weren't spending every weekend in the library.
Right.
So up until about the age of 10, we were in the library every weekend getting loads of books for the next week.
Oh, that's
And
so
then
cool.
bringing it back in and that
Kristen,
kind of
that's
stuff.
what medical physicists do.
Well, but it's a great service, right?
Yeah, sure.
It is.
And they had the computers and they had the stuff that libraries do, right? I mean, if you go to the Round Lake referendum, you'll see they do a whole bunch of stuff that's great for people. And then they got this beautiful new building that's bigger and has beautiful grounds and, in my opinion, isn't quite as useful because I've got to walk a mile to get to different things.
Interesting perspective.
And it's now more in Lindenhurst than it is in Lake Villa because of where they found it. So
Right along the border.
Yep. So for me, it's not as convenient to get to anymore.
Right.
And now my kids are older, so it doesn't need to be convenient for me. You have one younger than mine. Do you go to the new one? What do you think about it?
I like it. Holly does more of the bringing the kids to the library. I go there occasionally if I'm looking for something specific.
Sure, that makes sense. And I go there to tutor every once in a while, and the rooms they have for tutoring are fantastic.
Yeah. And presentations. And also, don't forget, it's only about a block away from my office because
Oh, that's right, because you're in Linden.
Lindenhurst.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's helpful. So just that's my experience with the two, right?
Sure. But I know you well enough to know, Jim, that your inconvenience isn't enough to get you to oppose something. What you do is you generally tend to look at what is the greater good.
That's correct.
And yourself be damned.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, because if you're going to do something government-wise,
Right.
it should be something that is done to
Appeal to the mass.
not appeal to,
No?
to make the lives of the mass better,
For the greater good.
which is not necessarily the same thing as appealing to them.
So it's interesting. So I'm going to relate this to real estate because that's what I know.
Sure.
Because thank you. Oh, by the way, I fixed the problem. My Facebook was playing on my computer, and so there was a delay of it running its feed into the board. So I apologize, everybody. That's what the double sounding was. So I'm going to relate this to what I know, because I know real estate.
Sure.
When someone's selling their house and we're making recommendations on the things that they should be doing to get it sale ready, what repairs to make, what type of updates, design changes, paint changes, color changes, things like that. Our recommendation is always to do not be very specific. You want to be as broad in your appeal as possible, because when we're marketing your home, we're going to market it to a certain audience, and that audience, we're hoping 80% of those will desire what it is that you've done. It doesn't mean that you like pink, and therefore, if we do it pink, we won't ever find someone who likes pink and will buy it. The problem for us is there's someone out there who likes that pink wall, but we don't know how to find them. We know how to find the 80%. So when I say appeal to the masses, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But you're making a distinction that it shouldn't appeal. It should satisfy a required need. Is that correct? Okay, fair enough. And I agree with that.
Okay, yeah. And so when you talk about like selling things and that kind of stuff, selling the referendum and that kind of thing, I am of the mind that transparency is always the best thing.
Always.
And I know that that's never the case with government entities. Well, what I've seen is government entities do the minimum of what's required for letting people know what's going on.
100% true, and you see it time and again where they'll actually strategize how to these passed. But look at the library; they're advertising it as not a increase of 90% to your library tax. They're advertising it as a less than the cup of coffee a day. They're just kind of hiding behind euphemisms so you don't know the facts and you will vote the way they want you to vote. Instead of saying, what do you need? Here it is. It's, we think you need this. Now we're going to sell it to you.
Yes, that's true. But I also see that people who are against it do a similar thing.
Do they?
Yes. Because the way you put it is it's a 90% increase, period.
Right.
Which it is.
Factual.
Right? That is, well, yes and no. Mm-hmm. So, say, for example, your yearly tax on it is $100.
Okay.
90% increase is $190.
Yes.
$90 out of 365 days is not a lot of money a day.
Okay.
Right? $90 out of my paycheck in a week isn't a lot, because then dividing that 90 by 50, I'm looking at about $2 a paycheck.
Okay.
Right? And so what's the thing? Statistics, you can make statistics say whatever you want it to say.
Right, but 90% is 90%.
Okay.
What if all governments decided this year, look, District 46, they're doing a bond referendum too. What if all the districts decided they're going to do 90% increase? Well, now we have a $12,000 tax bill going up 90% to almost $24,000.
Fair enough. I'm going to go to my expertise again with cancer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember, about, I think it was 10, 20 years ago, there was this uproar about CTs and how much dose you get from medical
yes.
CTs and that kind of stuff, and how you have a 50% increase into the public's chance of getting cancer. Right?
That sounds scary.
So instead of
0.00002 to a order of magnitude.
Yes.
Understood.
So yes, it's a big percentage increase, but in the grand scheme of things, one person out of 100,000 might have died. How many people were saved by the fact that they got a CT instead of an ultrasound? I'm going to give you an example that I saw recently. There's someone they use both ultrasounds and CTs to look inside of your body.
Yep.
For cancers. And they do it to look for things like pancreatic cancer, which are deep. You use an ultrasound, you may or may not see it. You use a CT, you're more likely to. And there was recently someone who they didn't see it, and then they did a CT a month later, and it was 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters by 5 centimeters on the CT, which means it was there with the ultrasound. The ultrasound just couldn't see it. Right? But I had to deliver that 1 in 10,000 increased chance to do the CT, right? So risk reward type stuff. So where I'm going at with the referendums is we need to find a way to link what benefits are actually going to happen to how much of the to the increase.
Cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, so instead of saying this percentage or this euphemism or that euphemism, a simple cost-benefit analysis provided to the people. Instead of trying to sell it, just say, this is it. This is what we found we need. These are the people who we asked to look into it. This is how much they said that it's going to cost. Done.
Yep.
Right? And then, so that's half of the equation, right? That's half. The other half is, okay, but now let's be honest. We are not in a rich community. The Round Lake communities, other than the far eastern side of the county, we're the poorest communities in Lake County.
Well, you can say the Round Lake Area Library District is the poorest library district in the county. And that's because other lower income areas like Waukegan, Zion, North Chicago, they don't have library districts.
Correct. They
have municipal libraries.
Yes, that is correct.
I do believe the Round Lake Area Library District is the lowest income district. And it's also the smallest geographically.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It is the smallest. In fact, most of the libraries have a footprint about equal to the size of the Grays Lake Library and the Round Lake Area Library District. And it almost looks like someone just carved out that Round Lake area library district. If you look at the map, you can see it's kind of like it's probably about the third of the of the whole area. So Grays Lake makes about probably about 65% of that geography in the Round Lake area, but they have the same population, and that's because the population density in Round Lake area is higher.
Is higher.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. And so, I was watching a discussion on Facebook that you had basically two sides. You had one side that says no one uses it anyway.
Right, which is not true.
That's fine, yeah. But I'm just saying that was their argument, and so why pay more?
Right.
And then you had another side that says this provides all of these services,
Which
shouldn't
necessarily be the responsibility of that organization,
but even then,
Yeah.
it does. It provides a lot of services to people who are going to have a hard time finding a way to get those services somewhere else.
right,
Right. So I'm going to pay whatever I want,
right.
and
No, you're going to pay whatever I want. That's their argument.
or we are going to pay whatever I
Right,
want,
yes.
right? Because the person making the argument lived in
Sure.
the district,
Sure,
right?
makes sense.
And so what got missed in that argument was, are they doing the right thing now to earn the increase in money? So the folks on the folks on the pro side didn't care if they're doing the right thing now.
Correct.
Simply, these services are valuable, and I want more of them. And the one on the left was saying, I don't think that anyone uses them, whether they do or don't. I don't think they do, but wasn't talking about whether they provide it well if they do, right?
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so I went and I went online and I went to the Lake County tax page, and they had these nice big spreadsheets that are huge and unwieldy and a pain in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
And you love them.
I actually don't like the way they do them,
Oh,
because there's way too much information, and it takes a good half an hour, 45 minutes of deleting cells to get to where you can actually functionally use the spreadsheet.
oh wow. And
That kind of
that
thing.
means a lot coming from you, because you love a deep dive into a good Excel spreadsheet.
I do, yeah, but
That must be what you guys connect over.
Yes.
they make it unwieldy, and then of course they don't have they don't have all of the information in the same place that you would need to make it to like decide things. So they have all the taxes and that kind of stuff in one page, and then to get the how much do people make, I had to go to Google, and they pull their information from the census data of 2020. And then I just went to the 40 districts, or the 40 places that have districts, and then I looked each one of them up and found the median income for those places.
Yeah.
And some of the things what I found was, generally speaking, there is a slight correlation between how much money a household makes and how much they spend for their library.
Okay.
Okay. So, and it was the more they make, the less they have to spend on their library.
What?
Not the smaller rate, the less they spend on their library. It's not huge. Like, we're talking, the slope is very small.
Are you talking about dollars or percentages?
Dollars.
So I make more money, I'm paying less dollars for my library.
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's not, I mean, it's not, how do I put it? If I were to run a statistical analysis on it, I'm not sure if it would be a completely independent variable or not. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you take the data, you plot it out there, and you put a line on there, it's a negative slope, which says that the people who are making more money are spending less for their library than the people who are making less money.
Interesting.
And I'm going to be honest, I've been to a lot of libraries. Like you said, I've been around.
Mm-hmm.
They're not that different.
No.
They're really close to the same
Mm-hmm.
in how they provide services and that kind of stuff. Now, there's one in Waukegan that actively seeks out community members to make programs for them and invites the community members. You know, they actively try to get them in for the programs and that kind of stuff, which is neat. So that's different. But generally speaking, they put it up. They put it on their message boards, maybe put up on Facebook.
Whoever shows.
And, right. that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? They've got the books, they've got the computers, they have the telescopes, they have all of this stuff that's for service. Few people know about them except for in situations like this.
Right.
And
When they're trying to sell something else. Oh,
Right.
look at this shiny whistles we have.
right.
Yeah.
And
Give us $36 million.
but the bells and whistles aren't radically different. Right? Grays Lake Library is a great library and a transparent library. They put up what they're spending on, why they're spending it, that kind of stuff. They've
Yep.
got charts and all that kind of stuff so that their citizens, when they come in to the library, they can see exactly what their library is doing for them. Transparency, love it. Recommended for everybody, that kind of thing. And so I think that what some of the people who were on that on that Facebook discussion were trying to say was, we're not necessarily against the library getting more money. What we're against is not showing us what you're doing for us first, and then from there, how my experience at the library is going to change if you spend this money.
See, this is exactly kind of leads into my argument, which is it's unfair when these type of referendums hit town. They're almost always controversial. They're always emotional, and they have a great effect of starting to divide the community. They're so divisive. And go ahead.
Sorry, really quick. And that's why I pointed out Grays Lake. Grays Lake has had multiple referenda for multiple different things, and it has not divided the community.
That's very interesting, and that's probably where that transparency comes in real handy.
Yes.
Because half the population doesn't feel they're being cloaked or lied to or whatever. These come in, you undoubtedly get a vote yes committee, you get a vote no committee, they start hating each other, and especially with social media, it makes it 10 times worse. So you've got these two warring factions who are, and I'll agree with you, I'll give you the fact that, yes, we're using selective language that makes one side necessarily. I don't completely agree, and I think 90% is 90%. I think that's an important metric because, like I said, I live in Lakeville Library. My bill went up 0 when they built a new library. The Round Lake proposal is going to increase their taxes to for that levy 90%.
But
So
another way
that's
to look at
important.
that is, to be clear,
Yeah.
I'm okay with the tax that I'm getting taxed from the Round Lake Library. I'm from the Lake Villa Library,
Right.
Because I think it's not right that they have to borrow money to make things better.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm okay with it. However,
and that part of that is rooted in law. In fact, if the public knew about those reserves sitting there, they could have sued the library district and forced those to be abated back to the public. Luckily, that didn't happen, and they were able to use that money to build the new library.
right. And I just took note that they did a 0% increase on their rate this last year.
Yeah.
But it's because they were already high. Like their base rate was high, so they didn't have to.
Right.
Right. And I'm trying to think, I don't know where I'm going with it, but the Round Lake one is going to be higher, like significantly higher.
It's going to be the highest in the county, you said, right?
It's going,
Or the second highest. Who would be the first?
I'm trying to remember.
You don't just know?
I don't just
Was it
know.
was it Cook Memorial? Because that's a huge library, I think.
No, give me
While you talk about that, I'm going to go back to what I was saying, which is when it comes to the division within the community, and it's what I find to be intellectually dishonest, the way some of the folks debate about it. If someone poses a question of why do you need this, what have you done to earn it, where's your accountability for what you're currently spending money on, then they're accused of hating the library. Or when it's in a school district, they're accused of hating the school. And that is 1,000% not the case. In our experience, Kristen, that's what we do. We do real estate. Of 90% of the people we talk to, they love the schools, and schools are one of the predominant factors in what makes them buy into a community.
Absolutely.
They want good schools. So not everyone, there is a few examples of some outliers, but most people love the schools, and a lot of people love the library, maybe not as much as the schools. But because you question something doesn't mean you hate it, and it doesn't mean that's your argument. And I think it's a straw man fallacy to pretend that when people ask these hard questions to government entities, that it somehow implies their ideology and how they feel about that institution.
Agreed. And I will say that the way that the vote no with the schools did their thing, I loved it, because, like you said, I'm from the military. I'm a military guy.
Yep.
In the military, when you ask a question, when you point out a problem, you're also supposed to be able to point out an answer for that problem,
right?
For them to consider. Whether it's a useless garbage answer, you have to be able to say, this is something I think is wrong. This is how I would fix it, right? And when you did your Vote No campaign, it was beautiful, because you had they want to do this. Well, I can get a quote for this. It's doing the same thing. Why am I spending, I'm going to use a percentage to be a jerk. Why am I presenting 50% more here than I am here? That kind of thing. It was beautiful the way you offered solutions.
And that goes back to, again, when you and I first met, because when the District 41 was reboundering the schools, you and I, independently, before knowing each other, came to that meeting with different proposals about how they can divvy up that population change.
Yes, we did. Yeah, because to me, that's being a responsible citizen, right? The Boy Scouts would say it's being a good follower. As you have leaders and followership and all that kind of stuff and what you do. And when you're someone who is not in power, you say, hey, this is what I think should happen, and I did a little research, this is what I think, right? That kind of stuff. But I don't have like who's in first for all of these things, but I want to just how things are going to change financially, right? The way that I would have said it was, currently, Round Lake ranks 4th in tax rate, 28th in how much they pay for the library taxes, 32nd in median income, and that actual tax divided by the median income, so as a percentage, the real tax rate, they're 9th out of 40 schools, or out of 40 library districts. If with the new rate, their tax rate becomes first, their real tax becomes second, their median income stays the same, and their real tax rate, they're second. So they move from 9th to second, from 4th to first, and from 28th to second.
Okay.
So that means that they are going to be paying more than all but one other district in Lake County. So
that's significant.
So that's more than places like Lake Forest. That's more than places like Libertyville.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these places that...
Well, Lake Forest, I don't think is a district too. I think they're municipal, right?
They were in my list as someone who pays a library tax. So
I'm sorry, I could be wrong.
And I could be too. I'm taking it from the government.
I trust you more than me.
I take that. And so, but to me, that's a real way to look at it.
Yeah.
Right? And so the library districts that are in those currently so currently the one with the highest tax rate is Lake Villa. The one with the highest the one paying the most for their libraries is Hawthorne Woods, or second most is Hawthorne Woods, because that's where Round Lake would go as second place. Buffalo Grove is the second with the tax as a percentage of the income, so for the real tax rate. So I guess I would say that if I were someone, one who is going to be asking for the money, and one for someone who's going to have to be paying it out, I'd go to those libraries, and I'd see what they do.
Well, they have till Tuesday.
Well, you have this weekend,
yes,
right? And then the question is,
or you could vote no, and then they can come back and do it and give people time to go and do their own investigation.
That's true too. Yes, and if I can talk about the voting thing.
Yeah, can we got to take a quick break?
Sure.
Okay, great, and we're going to be right back, and hopefully there's no echo this time.
It's time for Real Estate Trivia. Played by Ty Burrell. Phil Dunphy is a real estate agent on What Sitcom, whose final episode aired in April of 2020.
The answer after we return.
Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr will return in just a few moments after these important messages. Don't touch that dial.
This is 98.3 The Life.
The Life.
St. Gilbert's Catholic Church in Grays Lake reminds the class of 2024. Each year, over half of all traffic fatalities involve teenage drivers. During your prom and graduation festivities, remember, underage drinking is illegal. Driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol is lethal. Drive with care. Don't take that dare. The life you save could be your own. This from St. Gilbert's Catholic Church in Grays Lake. For worship, they can be reached at 847-223-4731. than a pound of cure.
And now for today's trivia answer. Played by Ty Burrell, Phil Dunphy is a real estate agent on the popular show Modern Family.
Welcome back to Unlocking Lake County with your host, Dick Barr.
And welcome back. This has gone a little bit longer than we had planned for, so I know there's a couple more questions. Kristen, go ahead. Give us, what do you got for Jim?
Absolutely. So as Unlocking Lake County's resident millennial, I have a question for you. So we talked a long time about the referendum, and whether you're listening and you are super for it, or you are listening and you are super against it. Right now, you probably have, if you have any strong feelings, you have that feeling inside, right? Of like, what can I do about it? And I find that in this day and age, because of being on the internet and having that itch in your brain already being scratched of needing to connect with people and talk to people, because you can go on Facebook and talk to people you already know all day. And if you want to get the opinions of strangers, you can go on TikTok and you're going to get a bunch of videos that are already giving you exactly the kind of stuff you're interested in because of algorithms. So we don't really have a need to step outside and talk to neighbors and connect with our community that we're literally living in right here, right now. And so the question that I have for you is for our listeners who were hearing any of what we talked about today and wants to do something about it, but doesn't know where to start. What do you have to say as someone who is a little bit older than me, but also someone who's been in different variations
Got to
of
get to the
public
question. We're
service?
out of time.
Oh, okay. What do you have to say to that?
I have to say that Google is your friend. If you have an itch to serve, you can go on to Google and it's going to give you any number of institutions, both government, private, and religious, that are going to let you get out there and serve. I also have to say that social media can be your friend. If you happen to see something out there that you think that people would be interested in helping with, I'm going to give you an example. When the snow melted back in January, there was trash all over the place in our area. And as I'm going for a walk and picking up, I think, man, it'd be nice if I had help. So I did a poll on Facebook in our community, and there were 10 people who said, hey, when you do this in the spring, I'd like to be the person to help. So go back to this poll and let us know when you want to do it. So you can use that online stuff. You can use your social media to then help you get out and connect in the real life.
Absolutely. And that brings it right back around to
Well, I'm sorry, I got to.
care.
Yep, I'm sorry, I do have to close it off this time. But first thing they could do is vote, right? Get out, vote. Election day is Tuesday, Tuesday, March 19th, next Tuesday. Get out, vote whatever way you want. We're not trying to tell you which way to vote, but make sure you vote.
That's our revolution right there. We don't need any kind of armament or anything. Use the power of the vote.
Absolutely. Kristen, Jim, thank you so much for joining us, and all you listeners, thank you so much. This week, we'll be back next week with some more local topics.
Bye.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the heart of our community, exploring the ins and outs of real estate and meeting the people who make Lake County truly remarkable. Remember, every property has a story, and every community member holds a key to unlocking our county's full potential. Don't miss out on discovering more hidden gems and expert insights. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday at 12 noon for another episode of Unlocking Lake County with Dick Barr. Until then, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep unlocking the possibilities that await you in Lake County. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.
Yeah.